Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Elizabeth Swing Award ceremony for CIS. We're trying something new this year where we're recording our ceremonies because we always run out of time at the actual ceremony. So welcome. I'm going to turn the floor over to our awards chair in just a minute, Kara Brown, who will then introduce the chair for this award and the awardee. Kara Brown is an associate professor in the Department of Educational Studies at University of South Carolina and the recent co-chair of the Language Issues SIG. Her research is on language policy and equity in education in Estonia and the southeastern US. Kara?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for this wonderful ceremony to honor Elizabeth Sherman Swing and her award that she has given to CIS. I'm thrilled today to introduce the remarkable chair of the Elizabeth Sherman Swing Award Committee in her second year of diligent service and inspired service. Vandra Leah Maceman is a social anthropologist who has researched girls' education in Ghana, secondary students' aspirations in Canada, Spanish-English bilingual programs for third graders in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, USA, and global education in Canadian schools. She has researched and written about multicultural, intercultural, and anti-racist educational policies and immigration in Canada, as well as theory and methodology in comparative education. She is an honorary fellow of CIS and past president of CIS, CIESC, and the World Council of Comparative Education Societies. So well positioned to chair this award. I introduce to you Vandra Maceman, who will then introduce this year's awardee of the Elizabeth Sherman Swing Award. Take it away, Vandra.
Thank you, Kara. I'm very happy to see such a nice group here this morning. I know that Elizabeth would be thrilled to see the people that she knew and loved, particularly her daughter, Pam, who is here from Concord, Massachusetts, but of course here is in the ether. First, I want to thank my committee members. They are Cassie Freeman, who's not here today, Professor Cassie Freeman, Professor Ratna Ghosh from McGill, past president of the society as well, Vestalina Lambrev, who was on the committee and is one of the winners from last year, and Professor Jack Knipe. I guess I'll read my text now. As a longtime friend and colleague of Professor Swing, I was honored to be asked to help set up the mandate for the award and to chair the committee, which is was indeed a great pleasure to do. I'll just give you a little background for the award for especially some of Simona's colleagues who may not know. It's based on a bequest from Elizabeth Sherman Swing and was established in 2020 to recognize an emerging scholar who's conducting research on the policies or practices of multiculturalism and or multilingualism in Europe. And we could also include multicultural education as such. Its purview is related to Elizabeth's own PhD research on the impact of the Belgian, French, and Flemish language controversy on the structure of schools in Belgium. Its goal, or the goal of the award, is to encourage emerging scholars to feel recognized and encouraged at an early stage in their careers. As a mature student, Elizabeth was immensely encouraged by a Fulbright Award and by being knighted by the King of Belgium for her work on Belgian education. Later on, she was immensely pleased to be appointed an honorary fellow of CIS. She wants her award to bring about that same feeling of encouragement to an emerging scholar in the CIS conference. And so in the second year of the award, we congratulate the winner for 2022, who is Simona Szakacs-Behling of the Leibniz Institute for Educational Media, the Georg Eckart Institute in Brunswick, Germany, and her paper was entitled, "What Would Marx Say? Illuminating the Power of Solidarity Logics Across Transnational School Settings Marked by Privilege and Disadvantage in Germany." And I will now ask Simona to respond. She has up to 10 minutes. We're very proud of you, Simona, and everyone, please feel free to post your congratulations on chat. Thank you all. So Simona, over to you.
Thank you, Vandra. Sorry, my voice is a bit rough. I'll jump right in. As a Hungarian minority born in Romania under dictatorship, who has lived in at least 7 countries and has benefited greatly from the project of European integration. I am a migrant, I am an other, and I'm a European. So this award is an honor and a privilege for me in many more ways than I can ever express in about 10 minutes. But I will really try to be brief and throw some spotlights here. Firstly, as a researcher of Europeanization and multicultural education, it was impossible for me not to come across Elizabeth Sherman Swing's work. In fact, her research in Belgian schools, her book on problems and prospects of European education have been seminal to my understanding of multiculturalism in education and approaches to diversity and identity in various European education systems, and has provided the groundwork for my PhD thesis at first and then beyond that. Which brings me to my second point, to my paper that won this award, and I would like to tell you a bit about this. It draws on a larger research project that is funded by the German Research Foundation, and it's about solidarity in schools that promote the European ethos. Now, what do I mean by that? Schools that promote the European ethos. There are 2 types that I compare in this project, and each exhibits a different logic of multiculturalism. One is supranational, and the other one is national. And in the paper that I'm going to present at CIS this year, I contrast 2 schools from this project of these 2 types that are differently located in the opportunity structure. By that, I mean they have different levels of privilege. So the first school, the first type of school, the supranational one, it's a Scola Europea. It is part of a select group of schools that were established by the European communities in the 1950s for the children of European bureaucrats working in West European cities. And they resemble, as a way to imagine it, schooling for children of diplomats. Let's put it that way. That's how they were envisaged in the beginning. Their aim is to preserve students' national identities. So they are organized in language sections to protect mother tongue, while at the same time rendering the students in mind, this is how they put it, in mind Europeans. Hence, they follow a European curriculum, so a supranational type of curriculum, which is quite unique in the world. They are characterized by high levels of academic competitiveness and excellence, and the promise of transnational futures for their students that are already highly mobile and socioeconomically well positioned. One could say that they epitomize the privileged status of intra-European labor and educational mobility. On the other side, we have the national type of school that I contrast to this. And here I chose an integrierte Gesamtschule in Germany that is that covers all tracks, all academic and vocational tracks under one roof. So it epitomizes an egalitarian ideal, at least for the German system, that's very egalitarian. And it has an added ethos of Europeanity in that it obtained certificate as Europaschule. There are 600 such schools in Germany, and it's a group of regular schools that receive this special certification for promoting a European dimension, a specific European dimension, either because they teach more content on Europe or they add an intercultural element or multilingual element to their teaching. Now, their students are not so much imagined as transnationally mobile, but more as socioeconomically diverse. This is their audience. The curriculum is the same as in all the other schools in the respective German state, with the European aspects being an add-on. And so the Europeanity that we see promoted here is part of the nation states, in this case, the German state's attempt to deal with cultural diversity at home, and not any kind of idea of a supranational effort to promote a common European identity. And the future graduates are therefore not necessarily imagined as mobile, but as located within a multiculturally understood national society. And this is quite remarkable, I would say, for Germany. So my question was whether and how these different logics of Europeanity and multiculturalism that I just outlined reflect different logics of solidarity that are put forward either officially or enacted informally in the school context, knowing very well that we also have different understandings of solidarity. It can be understood either as a form of social cohesion in the classical Durkheimian sense, or as conflict and progress in the Marxist sense. So my findings revealed that the two modes of solidarity making were indeed in evidence here. The first one, more prevalent in the privileged schooling setting, the Scuola Europea, is more horizontal and based on well-exercised skills of criticality, but surprisingly blind to the self-privilege that these schools actually exhibit. So here the emphasis was laid on celebrating diversity, for example, between equals as a source of solidarity, and equality was called upon in relation to ethnocultural determinants, but not socioeconomic characteristics. So an example here is how, for example, foods or national stereotypes, like the French baguette, how they become benign signs of equality among the different nationalities that appear in this school. But at the same time, however, one could see, and I observed that in a philosophy class, power relations, how they transpire in a more invisible way. So the vertical relationships of power become irrelevant in a context where everybody is supposed to be equal. But in this philosophy class, I observed how the teacher was making pronounced efforts to bring his own working class background to bear on the students' debates of Marxism, basically. So he would constantly ask, so what would Marx say about this? What would he have said in that situation or about that argument? But his middle class students actually rejected with very strong arguments. One might say, that's why I call it skills of criticality, very seasoned way of arguing against Marxist arguments on supposedly universal practical grounds. So here we see how the school emerges as a reproducer of privilege that promotes, on the other hand, horizontal relations of solidarity within its own community. And I have called this horizontal or egalitarian elitism. And then the second mode of projecting solidarity that emerged in the other type of school is it contrasts this in a strong way. Because there, although it is built on the very premise of egalitarianism, as I said, by challenging these differentiating effects of early school tracking and teaching everybody under the same roof, this Europaschule exposed, perhaps paradoxically, a more vertical understanding of solidarity grounded in top-down actions. So language teaching, for example, was meant to help students who speak other languages than German to catch up and integrate rather than to preserve their identities or celebrate their diversities. Multicultural solidarity emerged here not as a prerequisite of equality, but as a condescending almost exercise, partly to address the so-called deficits that are introduced by this so-called here in German migration society. So an example here was how students who were involved in a social project explained their engagement to me as recognition of their privilege in living in an economically strong country and as an imperative to care towards others. Because here diversity, they argued, brings with it immediately disadvantage. So in this case, solidarity remains a vertical enterprise, which can be seen as a form of charity, while privilege is taken for granted without any chance for the vulnerable to challenge injustice. So in other words, while the less privileged school was meant to be the great equalizer of chances by teaching socioeconomically diverse students side by side, it can also be seen as reinforcing local hierarchies via its vertical understanding of solidarity. And I call this a vertical form of egalitarianism or an elitist egalitarianism, paradoxical way. So I interpret this with Annette Larot and Jean Agnon. I conclude that each school in this study fosters different skills to differently privileged students. Horizontal, taken for granted cooperative solidarity on one hand, with a strong distrust of progressive politics among the more privileged, and the vertical understanding of one's own place in society, and solidarity as charity to preserve the status quo of the vulnerable in the other. So I would love to go on and give you more examples, but I know I have limited time. So I would like to invite you to find out more about this in my presentation, which will be next week in the fabulous 21st Century Socialism special track. It's on Tuesday at 6. Well, you can check that in the program yourself, but there I will bring more examples of these 2 points. Now, I cannot finish without thanking those who made all of this possible. First, I want to thank the society, the board of directors, but also the award chair, Kara, and the award committee itself, Vandra, and also Elizabeth Sherman Swing herself and her family for making this award a reality. And not just for me, but for all past and future awardees whose lives will have been touched by it. Because as Vandra said in the beginning, it is really this kind of recognition that gives emerging scholars wings, especially when they are trying to emerge from their cocoons. And second, I'd like to thank the mentors who have supported me in this project, and not only here, women that I admire from the bottom of my heart: Yasemin Soysal, Sabine Hornberg, Felicitas McGilchrist, my colleagues and friends, Katharina Kessler, Ulrike Deppe, Anne Schipling, and particularly Annette Grefe-Goisch, who is the past recipient of this award, and she's also here, who has encouraged me and inspired me and supported me to apply. To my husband, Felix, our daughters, Dalia and Elisa, to our fully transnational families, I owe all of my curiosity and enthusiasm about Europe, but also about social justice, and about seeking to understand what Europe means for social justice and what social justice means for Europe. And finally, and this is really my last, I want to end with a question that harnesses the power of idealism. This is the theme of this year's conference. What if the values of social justice and human rights that the European project has claimed as its own triumphed every day in every single school and in every single classroom and community and state and home? For a brief moment back in the 90s, maybe we have thought that these values had indeed triumphed, but as the world is painfully witnessing the continuance of wars, conflicts, and unimaginable violence, and not just today, and not just in Europe, it may seem indeed utopic, perhaps even naive, to talk about European values and their power to change the world, especially when precisely these values have been used to oppress and colonize others. And yet I am here before you to accept this humbling award that is so strongly linked to these values, exactly these values, and to say that I do believe in the power of utopia and idealism. And these values are not dying in the battlefield in Ukraine or in Syria or in Myanmar. It's only when we stop fighting for these values and when we stop believing in them that they die. Thank you.
Thank you, Simona. I believe that I want to reach out to you with my hand to give you the award.
Thank you, thank you. I am taking it with my hand.
Congratulations, Simona. What a beautiful statement that you made.
Yeah, congratulations. Your work sounds fascinating. And to everybody who needs the conference information, her session is Tuesday at 6 a.m. Central Time. It's a virtual session called a pajama session. So if you're registered for the conference, you can log in, no problem, 6 a.m. Minneapolis time. And if you're in person in Minneapolis, you will also access the session on your computer. So that sounds like fabulous work. I thank you for coming, Simona. Thank you for applying for the award. Thank you, Vandra, and your committee for doing all the work to make the decision, and for Kara for overseeing everything, and for everybody who's attending. Thank you very much.